Kia ora, tagaho. Greetings, everyone. Before we jump in, I want to share something honest with you. This episode was recorded 3 years ago in the summer of 2023. If you've noticed the long, quiet stretches between releases on the show, the truth is, I got stuck in perfectionism. I would spend hours agonizing over milliseconds in the audio editor, caught in this fear that the final piece would never be good enough. That self-doubt turned into procrastination, freezing up, and letting other life priorities push the podcast aside. Sitting on these recordings does a real disservice to the people who open their homes and their hearts to me. These are conversations with living legends and close friends who carry decades of lived wisdom. Finishing the loops I started is a commitment I want to honor. So I'm breaking the seal, letting go of the need for perfection, and sharing these archives with you. There's no better person to step back into this with than Jim Barngrover. Jim is an elder, a lifelong organic grower, and a pioneer of Montana's sustainable farming movement for over 40 years. We first met through our dear friend Andy Ventries and the community at the Feather Pipe Ranch. And the connection was cemented on the side of a Montana highway when my old Prius overheated from a radiator packed full of grasshoppers. That's a story for a different time. If you want to hear his full story and his roots with the ranch, I really encourage you to check out his interview on the Dandelion Effect podcast. Maybe hear that first and then jump into this. It'll add a lot more context. So in June 2023, Jim welcomed me into his home in Helena. Just a few blocks away, 16 young Montanans were testifying in court for the historic Held versus Montana climate trial. Sitting at his kitchen table and wandering through his backyard garden, we laughed and traded stories about our travels in Mexico. From Jim hitchhiking with goats in Baja California and navigating Chiapas during the 1994 Zapatista Uprising, to my own time, traveling through and living in Oaxaca, we explored how those journeys deeply shaped our worldviews. We connected the dots on what it really takes to protect living culture, native seeds, language, and community sovereignty. Along the way, we talked about living soil and what it truly means to be a provider for the people around you. So pull up a chair and come sink into this conversation with Jim Barngrover. Enjoy.
Probably around 95, 96, maybe, somewhere in there. And I'd been to Mexico, first time was in 80. Well, that would have been, 43 years ago? And I'm 74, that'd be, I've been about 31. And I did actually meet up with Chris Cappy and several others from the ranch that were there for not Bruce Lee, what was his name?
My uncle?
Yeah. Maybe it was Young. Well, I can't think of it now, but a Tai Chi master. And he had a Tai Chi workshop in Puerto Vallarta and on the beach. And the Feathered Pipe, it was sponsored by the Feathered Pipe.
It was a Feathered Pipe trip.
Yeah. That I helped in the kitchen a little bit and cook. And I remember we did a luau kind of dinner on the beach. And I assisted with that. And while doing that, and it was New Year's Day or New Year's Eve, one or the other, and a fin well breached in the ocean. That just spectacular display. I'd never seen a breachy well before. That was, fin whales are big whales.
They are big.
That very same trip.
That's so good.
A couple months later, ended up on Baja and was hitchhiking up the west coast of Baja to go to, I think it was Guerrero Negro, which is a famous place to go to see gray whales, the calves and so forth. And we got picked up by this guy that was driving an old Chevy pickup that was a Americano. And he had 3 goats in the back of the pickup. And he asked me, and I was traveling with a female companion. He asked me if I'd ever butchered goats before. Well, I used to raise goats at the Feathered Pipe, and I had butchered goats before.
Instant connection.
Yeah. He said, hop in.
Yeah.
So we went up the coast and to this little tiny port and boarded a launch with the goats and went across to a small island where this wedding party was that the goats were going to be part of the feast.
It was for the feast.
Immediately we started seeing all these gray whale and gray whale calves, and some of them came right up to the boat. It was like, oh my gosh, this is so fantastic.
Yeah.
And then we explored the island, my partner and I.
Yeah.
And set up a tent. And then there was a campfire and a lot of people around it. We came into camp. And on the way in, I recognized a very distinct voice. And it was Katie Lee, who I had met in 1975. She did a concert that I helped promote for the Montana Wilderness Association convention. And here she was as part of the wedding party. It was pretty magical.
Years ago in Montana, and here you're on the Central Pacific Coast, or Baja.
Yeah. And Katie was known as the most staunch defender of the Colorado River through Glen Canyon, which was dammed by Lake Powell. And she never forgot that. She wrote a book called All My Rivers Are Gone, and until her dying day at 97 or 98, she was very bitter about that because she had gone through that as an entertainer in the 50s and early 60s before it was dammed, and knew that, and it was, in many ways equal to the Grand Canyon in terms of its own kind of splendor.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we became close friends. She lived in Jerome, Arizona, and I used to visit her quite a bit before she passed.
Arizona has been a destination for you.
Yeah, of sorts at times, but it's become more of one.
Right, because of the recent additions in your life, let's call it that. Yeah. But it sounds like you've referenced it. Now I'm noticing just a pattern. The high Rocky Mountains in the north, and then the American Southwest, the deserts.
Yeah.
What a great contrast.
Yeah.
And also beyond that, the unearthing of stories that we're coming to. I think one thing that I really enjoyed about being at the Feathered Pipe is I meet folks like yourself and others who've been through for years, if not decades. And so the accumulation of stories by all the individuals, and then on top of that, the crossover, the mycelium of all the interconnected players and characters that exist. And then with folks who travel, who've studied abroad, who've worked abroad, who have hitchhiked and backpacked and, vagabonded a little here and there. Yeah. It just adds, every time I sit down at a dining table, inside, outdoors, and see who I meet, it's like, all right, let's see what chapter of whichever book I'm going to open. But instead of reading it or hearing it like an audiobook, I am with a living, breathing human being that's telling me directly.
Yeah.
This is no exception.
And I reflect, and I mentioned this after we got to meet each other, and you told me more about what you're doing and traveling, and I think that you had gone to Mexico 3 years ago after we first met.
Yeah.
And I was reading your blog and I was going, wow, this is great. I can live vicariously through your eyes and your experiences. And it brought back so many memories that were important to me. So even though I haven't been to Mexico since 93, 94, it was 94, I was traveling in several places in Mexico, Belize, and Guatemala, but distinctly remember going to Chiapas and work and visiting the processing facility for the coffee that I distribute, Cafe Mom. it happened to coincide exactly with the Zapatista revolution.
That's right.
And I was advised by those at the processing facility, muy peligroso, muy peligroso. Do not travel in the backcountry and go visit farms right now. Jeez.
But there you were.
Yeah.
What encounters really stood out once you got the warning?
Well, principally riding a bus, a second-class bus, with natives, Mayan farmers and the like, and that the federales had checkpoints, which they had sandbags, machine guns, and small light armament, and were stopping the bus and coming on, and occasionally they would haul people out that were like 5 feet or less, adults. They were looking for,
they're targeting
native people to that area that were potential, I suppose, collaborators with the Zapatistas.
Oh man, so you're over 5 feet.
Where is that? Yeah, I was over 5. I was not a suspect at all. And I lost that, I guess. I had a Zapatista doll.
Oh, is that right?
I don't know what happened to it.
I'm going to clip this on you.
Oh, okay.
So the sound can come with you wherever you go.
All right.
Thanks.
I wanted to show you my Zapatista doll that I picked up there, but I'm not locating it at the moment.
Tell you what, when you come across it, because you may soon, take a picture of it.
Okay.
And send it to me.
All right.
It'll have this like full circle feeling of like, there it is.
Yeah. And that was in San Cristobal de las Casas that I got it because they had just occupied the square the day before that I arrived there, or the Zocalo. And there were all these Zapatista dolls in the marketplace, so I had to get one.
Support them.
Oh, yeah.
Support the revolution.
Oh, yeah.
In 2021, when we met, it was the summer. And by that point, I had just come back from Oaxaca, where I'd spent about a week on the coast and then in the city, as well as in the mountains. And so I remember probably mentioned it during our encounter. And that
may have been what spurred my,
And then later that year, I was invited by a local Oaxaqueña friend to come back and help her house sit and take care of her dogs and cats.
That's right, I remember now.
And so I had an extra few months in Oaxaca, which turned into a trip that allowed me to go to Chiapas, to San Cristobal. And I had allocated, I was like, a week or so as a starting point. Let's see how I like it. Ended up being there for 3 weeks. And although I didn't have any direct experiences meeting the Zapatista, I got little snippets of stories from people who lived there and shopkeepers. And some of their products were sold, like the cooperatives that they have formed that live outside of San Cristobal. They would sell the honey or other kind of agricultural products.
Yeah.
And most of which is like local, organic, all the things I love. So they were just sold at coffee shops. The 21st century version of what the Zapatista is doing has great overlap with a lot of people who are returning to land and wanting to farm sustainably without chemicals and doing regenerative agriculture. So I find it so humorous that your experiences in the 80s, being on the bus with the locals and my encounter with them, coincides with so many things that you and I stand for, and of course the circumstances in which we met.
Yeah,
it's just this very wholesome feeling that I don't currently have the words for.
Yeah. Well, I got a real appreciation for what the issues were that the Zapatistas had, essentially risen up and rebelled, and that they were long-term oppressed people that were not being supported and given opportunities by the Mexican government. That's right. They were repressed substantially, somewhat similar to, I don't know, Native Americans in the U.S., if you will. Indigenous people in Latin America had their own repression for the most part, and still do.
Yes.
Certainly in Guatemala, and when I was there, and that would have been 94 as well, just before I went to Chiapas. In Panajachel, Lake Atilan, every night the lights would go out. And I was in the market there one night and asked one of the vendors why the lights were going out. Oh, it's the revolutionaries. They're just blowing up the power lines. Yeah.
Are they blowing up the? Excuse me. Took a bite as you were telling a story. Were they cutting the power lines because they didn't want power coming into their communities? Was it a showcase of unity and power to the regional local government? Or, what was the reasoning behind it?
I think it was probably trying to make it inconvenient for the establishment to show discontent and maybe enlist support more than anything. That's my assumption. I wasn't as well versed and educated on the specifics of that as I think I was in San Cristobal by an expatriate that was a coffee shop owner who really took the time and explained the issues to me. Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. Like the stories we can soak up when we meet the right people.
Yeah.
I wonder if that coffee shop is still in existence or it's evolved into something.
Yeah.
Because the center of town, to my knowledge, like the grid really hasn't changed. And like the core center where the commercial and maybe not recreational, but the cultural historical aspects. Yeah. Or, it's revolved around the central street, the churches, of course, the plazas.
The church was built in 1540 or something like that.
Exactly. So I'm curious as to how many stages it's gone through, or it could still be an active establishment serving coffee, and it could be like an underground meetup point.
Yeah.
Zapatista.
Unfortunately, I haven't been back there. I would love to go back to San Cristobal. The city a lot. Like the climate there, it was 7,000 feet elevation,
That's
something like that.
It's a high mountain town. Yeah.
Yeah, really comfortable.
I really enjoyed it when I was there. And there's creeks running. It's not so large of a city that you feel choked and overwhelmed by it. You can walk out of the town center area and it's radically quieter. And there's trails and there's just a lot of cool things happening in the hills with the liveliness of the preservation of indigenous cultures in the region too. It adds so much more depth to what otherwise could just be yet another you come in here, you see some people performing in the street, you buy some souvenirs, eat some food, and you go. But you're like, there's something here that's deeper than meets the eye. And it doesn't take long, especially if one has curiosity and some Spanish-speaking skills. To formulate this realization, wow, this land has been occupied for a long time, and there's been a lot of revolution, resistance. The isolation, the geographic isolation, I was told, was to their advantage in not being had as severe of a erasure of their culture and genocide. There's been some good allies that have come through to kind of push back on this kind of rapid commercialization and capital wave that a lot of folks there wasn't really on board for a long time, as we've talked into the Zapatistas.
You mentioned street performers. Yeah, that is something that I really enjoyed in Mexico, and especially in Oaxaca City. I remember a pantomime guy that just got the people walking by would start walking into his pantomime and play bit parts with him, including myself. It was hilarious. It was really good. And one evening also, I believe in Oaxaca City, there was a I guess you'd say a radical politician probably that spoke Spanish, and unfortunately I could understand a little bit of it, but I really wasn't fluent at all in Spanish. And he was really rallying the crowd, and there was a big crowd. But I got enough of it that I remember that he was calling basically the general population of Mexico sheep, because they were following a lead that was not going to benefit them.
Right.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Yeah, imagine that.
Abeja is sheep. And so, that would get some responses.
Yeah.
Being called a sheep. Like, I'm not a follower. Well, yes, we're going to do this together. A good public speaker, in spaces where people historically have gathered like that to hear. Yeah, I could just imagine the energy and the feeling of like, yeah, we're in this together. But yeah, I think it speaks to the spirit, the resilience in people wanting their own sovereignty.
Yeah.
And standing up for injustice and corruption, and places where they're like, hey, this could absolutely be much better for the people.
And I'm struggling with names right now, but one of my early trips to Mexico in the early 80s probably, I knew from an elderly couple from Dixon, Montana, that had a little center that was based just off of Lake Pátzcuaro, near Pátzcuaro in Michoacán. And they were agricultural based, and I visited them. And in Michoacán, and they were doing this. It was land that was owned by the widow of Mojica, who was a revolutionary general in the, I guess it would have been, 50s or 60s maybe? I forget the history, but he I think ran for president of Mexico, was not elected, but on a progressive party ticket. And I got to meet her. And I wished I could remember more about that encounter and the specific name, but I want to say her last name was Mojica. But I'm not confident of that now.
Yeah, well, for the listeners who are really curious, look it up.
Yeah.
With what Jim remembers right now, 50s, 60s.
It could have been earlier than that, though.
Presidential candidate.
It could have been earlier than that. Yeah, because this would have been early 80s, and she was probably in her 80s herself.
Already, right. Wow. And, at the time, you were meeting the elders. And, yeah, you really, from Baja, right, Nayarit to Michoacán, quite certain you had spent time in Mexico City, because that's just a hub of things, right?
A little bit, not a lot.
Right, and then down south towards Oaxaca and Chiapas.
Oaxaca and Cuernavaca, Tepoztlan.
Tepoztlan. Oh my gosh! I think post podcast recording, we can talk more about that. We can do a whole episode on Mexico, really, and Guatemala. Yeah, which I think I'd be very keen to, because Mexico has provided so much amazing knowledge and good friendships, great experiences, great stories for me in the last 2 years. Having been there originally for two really good friends' wedding, and then realizing this is our southern neighbor. The history is so rich, the food is so good. It is far less dangerous than what we hear and perceive on most media channels. Of course, the cartels and drugs are real, the shootings are real, but it's not as frequent, to my learned experience, as sometimes the news makes it. it doesn't take long for one to realize, okay, these are the areas that locals tell me not to visit. You take that advice.
Yeah.
You have a little street smarts.
Yeah.
If you don't partake in that system, chances are you'll be left alone.
Yeah.
I honestly think the chances of getting into a violent situation in most parts of Mexico may be as high, if not actually lower than especially urban areas of the U.S.
Yeah, I would agree.
So I've gotten a lot, and for me, being able to have the different cultural lens, really understand the depth and history of the Americas through the people whose ancestors have been there for hundreds, if not 1,000+ years.
Yeah.
You know, we're not just talking about, oh, we're a 5th generation farmer. Hey, not discrediting that, but I'm saying like deeply rooted wisdom from the land and the water. I think it's remarkable. You know, my most recent trip allowed me to go back again to Oaxaca, to the coast, to see the modern adaptation of a lot of indigenous folks, you know, their current struggles and their current life. But it's not like every day they're out there fighting and pushing against, you know, riot police and covering themselves up from pepper spray. It's just like all of us really are looking a way to live harmoniously with your family and loved ones.
Yeah.
And they're just trying to adapt to this radically changing environment where there's a lot of different national interests, some foreign money coming into it, you know, technology and how that's changing the landscape and the marketplace. The influx, for example, of a lot of cheaply made goods from Asia. You know, how do they uphold their craft, being used to selling maybe handicrafts and art, but now they're weirdly enough competing with like cheaply made goods. The struggle is still there. I think it's a part of life, but I think more in common with our humanity than what appears on the surface. So I find it really a really good place to be a visitor, but also to know that no, I can belong here, but I do need to be aware of my actions, how I'm spending money, which businesses I support, how do I become someone that's aware, at least on the surface, of the history, and not be an ignorant tourist that's adding to the gentrification and change of the landscape.
Yes, yes. Or obnoxious tourist, which I saw also. Yes.
Yeah. I would love for this to be, and we've already gotten a good start, less about the ranch, which I adore and love, because I'm curious about Jim Barngrover through the years as someone who, you know, has traveled, has been immersed in different cultural contexts. Of course, we're going to talk about your work, because I think your work is nothing short of impressive and admirable, and I have huge respect from just the bits and pieces that I've gathered from our conversations directly and from what you have shared with Andy and the podcast there. And certainly for me, because I have such an interest in organic foods and health of communities and the regenerative ag revolution that's ongoing, that I think used to be more underground. And now it's like, hey, we're here. We're not going away. We're stronger in numbers. And I love that I'm re-meeting you and being one of the big players in helping people realize that this is really the way forward and how we can continue to do this work because it's intergenerational. So yeah, I'd love to kick that off in the segue of our conversation with the epiphany that you shared with Andy. You said that it was late May. It was a warm night. And it happens to be a night that was a full moon.
Yeah.
And you're out digging in the garden after sunset. And the frogs were singing in the nearby creek. The crickets were chirping. And I had a shovel. And I felt that this is absolutely the most connected I've ever felt to the earth and to living organisms.
Yeah.
Wrap that up by saying it was my reintroduction or being reconnected to the soil and to all creation.
Yeah. Well, that's hard to add to that. It was an epiphany. Yes. It was in the moment, in the spirit, the connection between the celestial and the earth. And it was dark. It was well after, darkness had fallen. Yes. And there was, the moon was literally radiating, yeah. Or so it appeared, and it was just like I was in that conduit between the heavens and the earth, yeah. And listening to ethereal voices. It was something that I'll never forget, and stayed with me, and in my own way, I still experience that. Maybe not as profoundly, but still, it's a touchstone that I can go back to when I'm gardening sometimes, when I'm especially not obsessed with whatever I'm doing and just observing.
Yes.
Yeah.
The simple joy and depth of it.
Yeah.
Because when we realize the deep connections when we step into a garden and a space that we've grown, cultivated with heart and time and dedication, and you see the bees come through and the butterflies fluttering by and the peas are having their first flowers, and you're like, this is the miraculous design of each seed and the entire cycle of nutrients, air and water, mm-hmm. to push all of that into existence.
And there's one more thing that I apparently didn't elaborate on, but yes. was definitely part of the sensory awareness. And that was the earthiness, the aroma coming up, the moist earth and the fertile earth. It was even though it was the area was down the lower part of the ranch, just above the entrance. Yes. And it had been a fox farm at one time. A fox farm. And there was all kinds of fencing to the ground too. But it was enriched substantially from all of the yeah. Right. Yeah. So it was fertile. But it had been, I don't know how many decades, maybe 70 years, 80 years.
Wow, of that magnitude.
Maybe not quite that long, but a long time.
Sure. But that's the time scale we're working with that we have to understand. Mm-hmm. Some of these
apparently fur-bearing animals for wealthy women that like to wear furs. I don't know. Oh, that's my suspicion.
Got it. That is most certainly a thing of the past. And, people of my generation and younger would be like, a fox farm?
Yeah.
Because it was for the fur. Of course, some of the first people that came to this region to colonize the place were trappers and miners and lumberjacks.
But I don't think that was related directly. It was subsequent to that. Sure, and for, I'm pretty sure, furrier trade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But still part of the history, right? Yeah. You don't hear that as much in Arizona.
They were Johnny-come-latelys.
They had other kind of farms, I guess.
In 1912 or 18, they became a state.
Yeah. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I replayed it so many times so I can not just write down the words that you spoke, but also really feel. I think those of us who have worked on farms in some capacity, whether it's like a seasonal wolfer mm-hmm. or a long-term farmer, can probably agree there's been a singular or multiple moments where we stand there in a field, in a garden, in a greenhouse, what have you, and go, oh, wow, this is amazing work. This is divine. There's an element of divinity to it. Where I think you said the conduit, the orchestrator of this great living experiment. Yeah. And not only that, right? We benefit from the sight of really beautiful flowers, really beautiful fruit, the lushness of the garden and the space, but we get to eat and sustain our bodies. If we're partaking in this living experiment such that we're building compost and topsoil and really fixing nitrogen in the ground and thinking of the long-term ecological health of this tiny little substrate that sustains all life on land. The point I'm coming to in my life, internally and externally, is like, there's no better work. Nearly.
Yeah.
Perhaps the only thing more is to bring this really good food and this realization to those in your community.
Yeah. And that event in 1976, it would have been May of 76, brought me back to my childhood, which I grew up on a farm in Wyoming. And an incident occurred there when I was a young boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old, that my father was exposed to parathion, which was sprayed aerially for sugar beets, for a wireworm or worm that would damage sugar beets. And he developed a neurological condition that essentially was early onset Parkinson's at age, I think it was 29. Oh my gosh. And he lived until his early 70s. And I saw what that did to him. And that was a very large motivation in terms of, if I'm going to be involved in agriculture, what can I do that counters that negativity in terms of not just what happened to him, but using poisons in our environment that have sometimes severe consequences, not just on humans, but on wildlife, on soil organisms, on drinking water, in the air, contaminants that are long-lived, some of them, and certainly that get into our food. Right. So that was a real motivation for me to seek out and pursue an alternative agriculture endeavor to the paradigm that was prevalent, especially in the early 80s with Earl Butz as Secretary of Agriculture, suggesting that farmers need to plant fence row to fence row and use all the modern chemicals. And so I was a minority voice for sure in terms of agriculture in Montana. But what started out as a modest and, or at least counter to that kind of system, certainly has taken root, and though it's still a minority voice, it has many strong advocates. I just talked to a friend of mine, an organic farmer out of Chester, Montana, that's going to have a farm tour next week, and I'm going to that farm tour. And he was one of our core growers with Timeless. And he's a young guy. I don't think he's 40 yet. But when I first started with Timeless, doing as a grower liaison in charge of procurement about 9 or 10 years ago, he contacted me and asked me about possibly growing an organic crop for Timeless. And he'd never grown organic before, but he has some land coming off of CRP, Conservation Reserve Program, which hadn't had any chemicals on it for a decade, 2 decades, I don't remember. He really took it to heart. He's become one of the more innovative growers and is now certified regenerative organic agriculture in addition to being certified organic. So I'm looking forward to participating in that farm tour, and I haven't been to his farm for 2 years now. So yeah. In fact, John Wicks, we visited his farm.
I was going to ask.
Yes.
And I was like, Chester, Montana.
Yes,
Because I was like,
that's where your car got. It died. The grasshoppers.
You know what I'm going to do is when I add notes to the podcast, I'll record on my own, explain the side story, so folks can.
That's where we first met. Was just about a mile south of Chester,
and we went to meet John.
Yeah.
After we figured out that best to leave it and deal with it a different day. Yeah, he was. I noticed one thing. I noticed when we drove up his driveway. It was like, oh, it's a younger fella. I assumed, and this is from statistics I've read and some farmers I've met. The average age of farmers in the U.S. is getting older.
Yeah, and it's in the late 50s.
There's not a lot of young folks coming out of high school or even college going into the field, literally. No pun intended. But with the aging population of the farmer and the enlargement of commercial farms, it becomes this really strange dynamic where it's harder to enter. And it's also a style of farming that for any younger folks to enter, that's not the style that they want to inherit or buy or continue. Yeah. And so it was really refreshing to see someone that's, roughly from my generation go in it with such heart. Yeah. And I remember when we sat down for a little question and answer session, under the tree on his bench, where I learned that he was also part of a group or a board of getting more farmers to understand hey, these are the implications. Yeah. This is really the short, medium, and long-term benefits of what we could do. But we have to understand that some of these chemicals we're using may not be only the benefits that the companies that are selling us are telling us. Yes. Right? So I was just like, wow, this young guy is really infiltrating a big kind of set norm that's really only been in existence for a few decades, coming out of World War II and the baby boomers and the need for ramp up production in the US for food. So I think it's also possible of that magnitude of time or less, when there is more awareness and education, really deep realization that the way we've been doing it served us, but the real cost of food and the real cost, if we can even quantify it, of the value of the built environment needs to be considered. Yeah. And if we do take that into consideration, then there needs to be a shift, and rather quickly.
And it's also cultural and social and economic.
Support for Wilderness Within comes directly from listeners like you. I want this space to stay unhurried, uncommercialized, and deeply rooted in human stories and our connection to ourselves, to one another, and to the land. No sponsor breaks selling you mattresses, Razor subscriptions, or VPN codes. After 8 years on Patreon and 5 years of newsletters, I have brought everything together under one roof on Substack for Letters at Dawn. This is my new devotion, a space where standing for truth naturally emanates through my writings and recordings. While I'm committed to releasing this complete collection of recorded podcast conversations, Substack directly supports a deeper personal evolution. It is where I document my journey of rediscovering and reclaiming my identity, past, present, and future. My wish is that these shared stories and knowledge serve you on your own inner discoveries. To support this work and dive deeper, head over to lettersatdawn.substack.com to become a paid subscriber or join the free list. If financial support is not in the cards right now, please know there is zero obligation. If you ever feel called to share an episode or leave a review on Apple Podcast or your favorite app, it helps me understand what you think and feel while giving these stories visibility in the world. To those who have already shared and reviewed, thank you deeply. A massive shout out and gratitude to all the past Patreon subscribers, clients, and other supporters through the years for not just Wilderness Within, but for so many of my endeavors. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. You can tune in to Wilderness Within everywhere podcasts are found, except Spotify, which I have intentionally removed the show from due to their funding of military startups. Whatever you choose to do, thank you for being here, for honoring this evolution, and for walking this path with me. And now, back to the episode.
It needs to be considered.
Yeah.
And if we do take that into consideration, then there needs to be a shift, and rather quickly.
And it's also cultural and social,
yes,
and economic.
Yep, all of it.
In like Chester, all those little Highline towns across Montana, and this is true across the United States. There used to be thriving little communities with infrastructure. They had their own grocery stores and banks and bakeries and butcher shops and so forth. Mm-hmm. And now they have virtually nothing in terms of those. They have to travel, sometimes 100 miles to go to Walmart.
Yep.
And the population is decreased. Kids don't come back to those communities per se. Right. And they're dying.
Dying towns.
Yeah.
Shrinking villages.
Where they used to be, have thriving communities.
That's right.
And that's a high price to pay.
I'm getting chills hearing about that because I believe that so deeply, and it's sad when I road trip across the US and find that there's a mill, there is a Walmart or a Target, and the shops in the main part of town are closed for lease, for sale.
My hometown, Moreland, Wyoming. Uh-huh. I was back there last September, and I'd seen it dying. Main Street was dying. Population is slightly more than when I graduated high school. Mm-hmm. But the Main Street, which was thriving at that time, we had 3 pharmacies in that town. And they were all on Main Street. And soda fountains and banks and so forth. There's still, I think, 2 banks, a bar, a car wash, and I think there's still a car dealership, but 90% of the stores were closed.
Correct. Yeah.
It was just horrible.
And it's not unique to your hometown either, right? We see it across. So I think maybe the question I want to pose to you, Jim, because I would love to hear your insight on this, is I'm someone that tries to shop local when possible. Oftentimes, I'm priced out by the retail prices of a typical local store. Mm-hmm. And the lure of Amazon and Target and a lot of these big box stores, whether online or in person, that economic allure is very real. And there are a lot of folks of lower economic standing that to them, in their world, there's no choice but to shop in these big box stores where it's marginally to significantly cheaper. Yeah. It's worth even driving 50, 60, 100 miles to do one big shopping run, because even with gas and time, it's worth it. Yeah. Right? So I guess what I want to get at, and I want your insight on it, is I don't think everyone's going to, even within 1 or 2 generations, shift their mindset on shopping at a higher price local store because they really see and understand the long-term benefits of putting money back in the local economy. So with these tech giants and companies that are providing lower prices and attractive, all-in-one shopping experience, they're not going away anytime soon, right? They're going to be a part of, I think, our society for a long, long time. And they have the resources and some of the most brilliant marketing and programmers in the world working for them to continue to adapt to 2020s and 2030s and beyond. Yeah. How do you see us balancing and bringing life back into our local economies and communities while all of this is still true?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a big question. But I think everybody can start out, or almost everybody can start out by supporting, at least partially, somebody who's growing food for them locally. That'd be the first place I would look.
I like that.
and support those businesses that buy local foods, like local bakeries, for instance. We have one here in Helena that, it's they even buy the coffee from me, so it's great. No, but and there's quite a few food initiatives that are occurring in different organizations that are evolving or have programs that are working on this very thing to get and I think this is true throughout the United States, but in Montana there are some very significant initiatives going on and that are working on getting local foods to local people. And that includes, like in schools, certainly food banks and restaurants, university cafeterias. Those are all happening here. And I think that that's fairly universal, but it's not near enough. But when you look at, and I've been reading occasionally anyway, about the exploited farm workers that, for instance, the tomato pickers in Florida that can't afford to buy decent food. They're working long hours and hard conditions and can't afford to buy decent food. They're dependent upon food banks for their sustenance. There is something really wrong with that. And that's true in many places where we have agricultural workers. We do not respect them. They're not given living wages. And that, we look at what is a living wage, and that's pretty important for a lot of policy that is passed relating to, what's a minimum wage? Well, it's not a living wage, that's for sure. That's right. But piece workers and agricultural contract workers are exploited to the max. Yeah. And yet we depend upon them for producing our food and our sustenance. It's not a good model. Right. Why don't we employ our local neighbors to produce food for us instead? We can get into all kinds of things here for U.S. foreign policy that encourages this migration of desperate people who are fleeing horrible conditions, whether it's threats of death or natural disasters due to climate change or what have you. Another incident that I think Mexico right now, I read this morning, that they're going to require that anything that is masa that's made into tortillas be from Mexican corn that's non-GMO. And this was a huge thing, and this was under Clinton, the North American Free Trade Agreement, where we basically forced upon Mexico our cheap, inferior nutrition GMO corn. That displaced about 1 million farmers in Mexico. And, they were poor people to begin with. And now, we get all this migration to the United States, and not so much maybe Mexico now, but at 20 years ago, it was principally Mexico. Certainly. And we've created problems that we're reacting to at our borders and internationally, that if we had more rational policies, that we could solve a lot of problems. And a lot of it could start with agriculture. No doubt. For local people growing local food for local people.
Wow. It's very encompassing because I love that you spoke into local action all the way up to international policy. One thing I didn't realize, I know the North American Trade Agreement sounded very grandiose and, benefiting nearly everybody, but we're still, a couple of decades later, living with a lot of the consequences. And I was thinking in my head as you were explaining this, that these are the symptoms of long-term policy changes that really benefit the few and those who are already in positions of great resources and power. And so what I'm hearing too is, well, depending on who you are, what age group you're in, and what economic level you're in, there are ways in which you can partake, be more proactive in your local economy, your local community. And it's like I do see like inaction has led us here. Being apathetic to the political system and to our neighbors has led us here.
Yeah.
We can't continue to only blame governors, presidents, senators for policies that they have put into place, often due to lobbying by big interest. But there is an element of like, hey, like we've kind of allowed this to happen because we haven't been as proactive in talking to our legislatures and forming groups and policies that counteract some of these big interest groups. And so like, how much longer do we keep blaming and pointing and just saying like, everything is like hitting the fan and I hate this place? Okay, well, you know, can we become more responsible? And I really say we, it's all of us. I'm not going to even point out like the people who are complaining. It's like, I've done that myself. But the sooner we realize that this is the air, the land, the water is all something that we need and is shared, and the more we can get out of this headspace of like, I'm just looking out for me, you know, it has to benefit me before I care about it. I think the sooner we can actually take some action and make some good changes.
Well, we've got a classic example of potential positive changes right now in Montana with this youth climate lawsuit that's being heard today. Well, it's ongoing at the district court right down here about 4 blocks.
I can see it. Can you speak into that, please?
Yeah, I got to monitor a little bit of it. And basically, I think there's 14 or 16 youth that filed suit against the state of Montana for not enforcing environmental regulations that were, first of all, part of the Constitution, the new Constitution of 1972, which gave basically, in the preamble, it says the right to a clean and healthful environment to every Montanan. And then subsequent to that, there were other laws that were passed setting up the Montana Environmental Policy Act and others pertaining to regulations of how things are regulated in Montana, with especially energy and mining and such. One of the critical aspects that has been violated is this last legislative session, which just finished a couple months ago, is that the legislature, using last minute, very questionable procedural things, basically said that Montana can no longer consider what the carbon contamination from burning of fossil fuels, that can no longer have a bearing on any policy decision making. In other words, we are not going to regulate carbon emissions, especially if it interferes with commerce.
I wonder who wrote that piece.
Well, I can probably tell you who wrote that piece. One of the principals was the major utility in Montana, and they wrote it. No question about it. It was introduced by the son of a former lobbyist, their chief lobbyist. I won't mention names, but the son is an attorney from Great Falls, and it's here we go again. Montana Power Company 20 years ago, 25 years ago, went bankrupt. Was a very solvent company. Decided to get into communications in addition to internet and things like this instead of just power, and they promptly went bankrupt and left a lot of people holding the lurch. That's a whole other story. Now the modern day principle that came out of that Northwestern Energy. They are basically pulling off their shenanigans to the huge detriment of the future of Montana. And unfortunately, probably, given the changes in laws and the limitation, the scope that is going to be considered to be ruled on is not as comprehensive as it would have been without the changes in this last legislative session. So the state is contending these are moot points, and besides, we only contribute like an infantile percentage of the carbon emissions in the world, and so we're not a player anyway. So in other words, we have no responsibility, and we're going to continue to do business as usual.
What are the now these students that have formulated this lawsuit? Who's backing them? As you say, the hearing is probably now down the street.
Yeah.
Where do they stand?
Well,
where do we stand on this?
I have listened to maybe 5 or 6 of the students testify at length of what it means to them in terms of what they've seen in just their brief lifetime in terms of climatic changes especially, and how that's affected their health, their recreation, and their outlook for the future. And one young woman, maybe 19 or 20, this lawsuit was originally filed several years ago, and she basically said, I'm really having I always thought I'd be a mother. I'm having second thoughts about that because I don't know that I could morally justify bringing a child into this world, things of this nature. And also people are, other students that have asthma or other things that have been affected by deteriorating air, especially smoke from forest fires, and loss of recreational opportunities, fishing, for instance, rivers running low and getting too warm, and fish not reproducing.
It's erratic.
Yeah. And and every one of them that I've heard have been really eloquent. They're not one of the guys from Kalispell. He's 18. He was a hockey star, ice hockey. He's also a musician, and he's a thespian. And he played John Jovan in Les Miserables at his high school play. And anybody who could pull off that role has to be a pretty good actor and musician.
No kidding.
That's really high quality stuff, or at least in my imagination it is. Having seen several productions of Les Mis.
Right.
Oh my, yeah, probably my favorite all time.
A way to make a statement and make it extra memorable.
Yeah, he was credible. Oh my gosh, smart kid.
Wow. So here we are. It's very poignant that the future generations and the outlook of what it means to live here, and how that could shift not just the policy, but the culture of the state lies in the hands of these young adults.
Yeah.
It's very good. Yeah. I'm very happy about it.
There's a letter today in the paper, the Independent Record, by former city commissioner. And he wrote about this very briefly and said, well, given that Montana only produces like this infinitesimal part of the global CO2 emissions, then, well, I'm thinking, how much do I pay in taxes, and what percentages of that is that of all of the taxpayers in Montana? Well, it's almost infinitesimal. Why should I pay taxes? It doesn't make any sense.
What am I getting out of this?
It was really good. Yeah.
It takes some humor too.
Oh yeah.
To be like, hey y'all, like, what's gonna appeal to you? The facts, the irony, both. But it strikes a chord. I think that helps.
We have to laugh at ourselves. That's important. And laugh with each other.
Yeah, because if we don't, then it just feels a little depressing a lot at a time.
Yeah.
You know, without the levity and humor. You know, and for example, 2 weeks ago when I landed, you brought me to a potluck, and it's just the humor and laughter in that space. And I'd imagine a lot of folks, not that I know them well, but a lot of folks are aware, like, hey, like CO2 emissions are rising, there's less fish in the river, there's more forest fire, agriculture production is less predictable. We can still live and thrive and not let all of this weight, all of this pessimism and political turmoil tear us apart. There's a lot of things that, the chaos can't take away from us.
Yeah.
You know, and we stand firmly that building bunkers and stocking up on canned food and apocalyptic supplies is not the way forward. Sure, you can do that, you know, no, all good. But the power and true sense of community and belonging and healing comes from working together, because we have complementary symbiotic skill sets that can really continue gardening the Garden of Eden.
Yeah.
You know, keep bringing the butterflies back.
Yeah.
You know,
and that's, to me, almost everybody should be gardening. You know, that's empowerment. That's taking responsibility right there. Growing at least some of your own food. Yeah. And it used to be that way, that our ancestors very likely grew a substantial amount of their own food. And that is certainly not true anymore. Yeah. But even growing just a few things in a small plot, or even in big clay pots or plastic clay pots, right. We can do that. Grow a couple plants. Yeah. I like to say, because people ask me, why do I grow? You know, I've got a garden here in my backyard, and I've got a bigger garden, a community garden, and it's more than most people grow that well. And I have a cooperator in the community garden. I provide for myself and my wife, but also I take a lot with me when I go to Arizona for my son who lives there and his family, and I share with other people. And I like to comment that my grandmothers would be proud of me, because I'm a provider. I provide food for not only myself, my family, and friends. And to me, that is really important.
Yeah. One thing that really stood out to me, and thank you for that beautiful personal story, the provider aspect, something that's come up in my life in the last several years as I live in community occasionally and get into spaces where spirituality, mental, physical, psychological health is a huge part of wellness in supporting each other, is the realization that there are these conditioning that us men have had in our lives is, in order to be a real man, you have to be a provider. Now, no matter your existing viewpoint on this matter, looking back far enough and just looking at let's say the physiological build of man as we know it, like you look back at some generations and far greater, it's like hunter-gathering and fending off predatory beasts. Yeah. There was an element of like, hey, women are primarily the caretaker, because they literally have bodies that nurture and provide in that way. And then the men can get together, strengthen numbers, and fend off danger, and to grow and carry maybe slightly larger loads, right? And so I think it's embedded in us, and also the social conditioning. But I think one thing that's come up, and I'm saying all this context because I've challenged this like embedding of what it means to be a provider, which in modern, usually urban or metropolitan, environments, it's to get a good degree, multiple degrees, get a good job, and provide with abundant amount of income.
Yeah.
Right? Which, hey, if we're to translate that into modern day terminology, it's totally valid, but it's not singular. That is not the only way to provide.
Yeah.
And in fact, I would challenge and say, hey, like, I'm not an anti-capitalist that wants to abolish the entire system and burn it to the ground. I see.
I thought we might get there.
Don't hold your breath. Don't hold your breath. Right? I think I've certainly thought of it in my most radical earlier years. And watching like V for Vendetta and hearing, stories of like the Zapatistas. But I see the middle way, kind of in Buddhist terminologies where, sure, this is one of the systems that has allowed humanity to expand and get to where we are today. I'm actually grateful for the monetary system. But I think the challenge I've been imposing upon myself and those around me is don't see this capital provider and having this like job and title as the only way, because we are so much more than just providers of income, and with that, goods and services. When we really create a handicraft, a piece of art, knit a scarf, grow the food, and bring that into a scenario where it's like, hey, I know you need this because we all eat, or I know you need this because I know you're looking for a beanie. It really comes from our own time and dedication. And the capital system, whether you love it, participated in it deeply or superficially, like, I think it's hard to argue against the fact that it removes a lot of the personal, intimate connection because the money has split it from the person that created the product or service to the person receiving it.
Yeah.
So unless you come back to this scenario where you're trading, where you know your baker, where you know the shoe repair person, and a person that's repairing your vehicle, and you think of exchange as more than just like, how much do I pay you for an hour and for parts? It's like, okay, what is this worth to me? What is this worth to you? How do we symbiotically have an exchange? Which really is like what our ancestors have always done. And so to be a provider now, to me, is much more multifaceted, kind of like what you're saying. Like the joy and the pride and the entire experience and process of planting the seed, watching it grow, harvesting and going, oh, I know my neighbor down the street loves a good tomato sauce. The personal touch.
All right.
How can we actually hate and fear each other if we bring that personal connection back in the picture?
Yeah. Well, indeed. And you mentioned fear.
Yeah.
That is a huge motivator that is probably out of control right now, in my estimation.
Fear gauge high.
And, I guess, how do we turn that ship around to having trust and appreciation for each other, compassion, instead of looking down on people that don't have visible means of support, for instance. Yeah.
It's a big shift, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. But hey, that's what potlucks are great for.
Oh, okay.
Keep doing potlucks.
Yeah.
I do want to use this last bit of time to bring on some really cool facts, because I'd love to end on a high note. So, for example, I wrote some notes from re-listening to your conversation with Andy, and you were saying that in 1987 there was only one professor in the region that was supportive of the type of regenerative agriculture that you and David and the co-founders of Timeless was trying to bring into the picture. And now there are maybe countless, dozens. And so students are exposed to it. Yeah. And so there is this like tangible shift in the younger generation that's coming out, as well as old farmers, right? So I'm curious as to, Montana becoming, you said that the number one lentil production and number two chickpea production, and the rise in organic food products and subsequently the proportion of organic farms in the state and in the region was sort of maybe positive outlook and news, being someone like you who's been in the field, pun intended, for so many decades. What are you seeing that's giving you optimism and hope? For example, besides this climate legislation that's happening down the street, like what gives you this like, yeah, we got this. Maybe not as urgently as I'd like, but we're going to be okay. And there's a lot of reasons to be hopeful and be bright about the future and right now.
Yeah.
What can you share on that front?
Well, I'll go back to young people that are coming out of college that have in their coursework or their experience at college gotten excited about food system work. And to me, that's one of the basic things that we need to recreate, that we used to have a much more robust, if you will, county extension agent kind of program that would assist people in learning how to grow their own food. And of course, we had many small farms when I was relatively small farms, and certainly my grandparents and my great-grandparents' generations, they were even smaller. Instead of consolidating and forcing people off the land, I do see a trend where some, not near enough, young people, there's so many obstacles, but that are overcoming those obstacles and starting businesses, growing food for people locally. One of my favorite examples, I don't think I'm at liberty to mention names because they're just finishing the details of purchasing a substantial produce farm in western Montana that have been growing there for a number of years. And I think that within a month or so, they will be the owners of that farm. And one of them interned with me when I was at Arrow 15 years ago. Remarkable individual and her partner. They've really set a new benchmark, I think, for what can happen for growing food for people in western Montana. That's probably the first thing I would say. Last year, I participated in what's called a soil crawl out here in the valley at the Double Bar X Ranch, which raises cows on pasture that are intensively rotated, followed by chickens in a chicken tractor, they call it. And then they also have pigs that are fed from farm and ranch feeds, and they have I think, a pretty thriving business. And they're at the farmers market, and they have a little retail place at the farm. And I can see them. I like to go down to the farmers market and visit with them each Saturday when the farmers market is going, and see how many people are purchasing and lining up to purchase products from them. So that's a good example, and that's just. The soil crawl. There were 60, 70 people that participated in that soil crawl for a whole afternoon, hot day, and we got to learn how they were doing things, what they were doing, how they're keeping the soil in place, and just that they have a thriving ecosystem that provides them with a livelihood.
That's amazing. They're sharing knowledge. It builds community and a sense of belonging, knowledge, and physical mental support. Mm-hmm. Getting 70 people for an event in Montana is big because that's already like 0.2% of the state's population.
Yeah. Well, and I might mention the Mannix Ranch along with the Sebin Livestock, and I forget the third one, that are now 406 that are raising and will be butchering and selling retail products in Montana, and they have a restaurant on Last Chance Gulch called 406. Yeah. And that's another great example of local ranches, and the Mannix Ranch is having a festival this summer, a 3-day festival featuring music, speakers, and cooking events, and they've already got, I think, 700 or 800 tickets sold, and there'll probably be quite a few more. So that's coming up next month.
You see, this is what I'm talking about. I think you can go on for a long time with great examples. But you can see what's happening, the landscape, and you can have the finger in a pulse, so to speak, as to what's going on. And I think that I can only imagine the deep satisfaction and joy, because this is why you do the work that you do, so that you can see these kinds of spark happen, and the gathering of other people. And it's not hierarchical. It's like, we want this to be level ground, even ground, where you do this in your part of the world, you do this in this neighborhood, and not change the overall culture of the place. Montana doing Montana, like those events that you speak of, it's like the ranching, the open sky, the barbecue, whatever it is. It's like, it's every bit of the lifestyle of Montana, but doing it with more awareness of how to treat the land and each other. Yeah, I love that. Like, I want to be here for that.
Yeah. Well, come back.
I know there's a lot of appeal for this state that has really surprised me in a lot of ways. Yeah, thank you for sharing all those good news. It makes me feel very bright and optimistic. And I think that's goes along with the good news I share with every newsletter. It's just like, it's so important.
Yes.
It's so important. Now I can reference you when I want news directly from Montana. Be like, hey, Jim, I don't have to read articles. Just tell me what the good news is. I will just write it up. This is a quote that you, towards the end of your conversation with Andy, I love to read out loud to those listening and to us. It's just so aligned with a lot of organic farmers and movers and shakers out there who are advocating for this way of thinking and being. Treat the soil well, it'll treat you well. It'll sustain life forms that enrich all.
Pretty basic.
Pretty short.
Yeah.
It's almost like a mantra that one can remember and just repeat.
Well, there's a lifetime of learning and treating the soil well. I've evolved. I'm still evolving. There's so much more that I'm not a real scientist. I'm kind of a seat-of-the-pants agronomist. And I've adapted and changed based upon what I see happening with my soil or soils that I work with to try to improve my cultural techniques and hopefully improving the quality of food that I raise. Yeah. Maybe more bounty. If not, I know the nutrition is really good anyway.
Exactly. And it tastes just a wee bit better.
Yeah. If you've never had an heirloom tomato fresh off the vine, you have been deprived.
And truly ancestral corn and the tortillas that come with it.
Yeah.
The smell and the taste and the texture is just next level.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really appreciate all that you shared. I've really enjoyed how organically it's kind of unfolded.
Well, there's only two things that money can't buy: true love and homegrown tomatoes.
Oh, that second one has to be out of friendship and beautiful exchanges only. Not putting a price tag on that. Yeah, truly. What is it in your garden that you're growing this year that you're like most excited about?
My pole beans, because we've had an unusually wet and intermittently cool spring. The bush beans have been not near as stellar in terms of germinating and establishing themselves, but my pole beans, they don't care. They're just growing like crazy. Yeah. Right.
Is it looking like it's going to be a good harvest this year?
Well, God willing, you never know what the great white harvester may come along, but that's always a risk you take.
I like how you just embrace whatever is going to come, even though it's off to a great start.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I would say this, that resilience is dependent upon diversity. And that to me means, okay, I've got two gardens. They're separated by 2 miles. Weather systems can be very different. One might get hailed on, as I referenced the great white harvester. And the other one might be fine.
Right.
Now, I've never totally lost crops, maybe single species or a harvest of them to, for instance, hail or frost. But growing diversity, even within a species, like different varieties of cabbage or broccoli or tomatoes, what have you, that some do better in different years, different circumstances. And that diversity is crucial, I feel, for an integrated system that's going to be resilient. You need diversity. We can't monocrop, and if we're all growing the very same crop from seed, we're vulnerable. A lot of vulnerabilities there.
Diversity.
And along with that is saving seed and improving it over generations, which I've been saving not near all my garden vegetables, but those things that are relatively simple to save: peas, beans, lettuce, mustards, things of that nature, even tomatoes. Yeah.
I love that.
Squash.
Wrapping up our wonderful conversation with the theme of diversity and collecting seeds that become
next year's crop.
Timeless.
Oh, I blew that one, didn't I?
I'm glad we could laugh. I'm like, we can end on a pun.
As we step out of Jim's garden, I want to circle back to the student climate trial we talked about during our conversation. When Jim and I sat down back in 2023, the Held versus Montana case was being heard right down the street. That trial led to a historic win. The Montana Supreme Court ruled that the state constitution protects every citizen's right to a clean, healthy environment and a stable climate. That push for accountability is still unfolding. Just recently, Jim sent me an update from the Helena Independent Record. A separate federal lawsuit led by 22 young plaintiffs, including Ava Lightfisser, apologies if I'm not pronouncing the name correctly, from the original Montana case, was recently turned down by a federal appeals court, leaving the U.S. Supreme Court as their next step. As Ava put it, the harm to young lives has not stopped, and neither has their drive to hold leadership accountable. Seeing young people take a stand in court while elders like Jim care for the soil reminds me that this work takes all of us across generations. Whether you are speaking up in a courtroom or building topsoil on a dryland farm in Chester, Montana, the heart of it is the same: choosing care over extraction. As Jim reminded us, resilience comes down to diversity, patience, and one simple truth: when you treat the soil well, it treats you well. Thank you for listening, for your patience with this show, and for walking this path with me. Take good care of your land, your neighbors, and yourself. Totisai. Modi ora.